This is a Southern Sin breaking news special. Be sure to like and subscribe now.
Every trial has a story. Every trial has a story the jury never hears, where the truth lives outside the courtroom. Join our host Dara Kennedy and the sharpest legal minds in the business for a new riveting show, Reasonable Doubt, What the Jury Doesn't Hear. No grandstanding, no spin, just the arguments that could change everything. Tonight, one question dominates the Rob Reiner murder case. What made powerhouse attorney Alan Jackson walk away? And can a public defender really carry a death penalty case? Emotions explode in the Uvalde school shooting trial against Officer Adrian Gonzalez. And shocking questions surface in the YNW double homicide retrial. Was there witness tampering? All of it is breaking on at Southern Sin.
Well, every trial has two stories, the one the jury hears and the one they don't. Welcome in, everyone, to Southern Sin. This is the platform where attorneys, investigators, and medical experts, they pull back the curtain and ask the question that keeps prosecutors up at night. Is there reasonable doubt? Welcome in. I'm your host, Dara Kennedy, and this is Reasonable Doubt. It's what the jury didn't hear, and court is in session. Today, we are breaking down a few cases that have rocked pop culture in the courts, and we know that you have been tuning in too. We are happy to bring you the YNW Melly double homicide retrial. It's off to a bizarre start. You've seen all of the comments on social media. The tragic Uvalde school massacre, which wrecked a lot of hearts. That's the trial of Officer Adrian Gonzalez. And of course, the most recent trial is the Rob Reiner double murder case. It's a major concern and it's a major courtroom drama. But that's okay. What we've learned is defense attorney Alan Jackson has stepped down. We're going to get into all of that. But of course, in order to break it down, we brought in the sharpest minds that you have seen on this platform. Joining us is attorney Gerald Griggs. We know what he's known for, cutting through all of courtroom theater to expose what actually holds up under law. You see him regularly on Court TV. Welcome in Franz Borghardt, who's here to challenge the narrative and analyze strategy from the prosecution perspective this time. That should be fun. And from Vinnie Politan on our News Nation to our studio, welcome in powerhouse defense attorney Josh Schiffer again. He is here to ask the hard questions that no one will. I'll throw a few of those at the entire panel. And anchoring the mental health reality of the Reiner case, our resident expert, Dr. Cheyenne Bryant. Of course, you've seen her everywhere. She's the New York Times best-selling author, and she is also a host of Truth Talks. Hello, everybody. Welcome into another what should be great discussion.
Hello, how you doing?
Happy New Year, everybody, and what a way to start 2026.
All right, everybody, let's get right into it. Actually, to start off 2026, we thought we were going to have an actual full arraignment in that double murder Rob Reiner trial. Let's get right to that one. Gerald, I'm going to start with you. Is this Nick Reiner, the double murder of his parents, his mom and dad, is this going to trial? Keep it quick, yes or no?
I think it's going to trial.
Oh, okay, thank you. Franz, is this going to trial, yes or no?
Absolutely going to trial, yes.
Absolutely. Josh, is this
Depends
going
on the
to trial?
politics, but no, I don't think it actually gets to a jury.
Okay. I asked for yes or no, but you know we got to follow up on
I
that.
get paid too much to do one word.
Okay, well, Josh, tell me why. It's a high-profile case. Why
High
did
profile,
Alan
and it deals
Jackson
with
walk
something.
away?
Yeah, it's high profile, and it deals with the most important issue in modern criminal justice, which is how do we deal with mental health. Here we have really an easy crime to be solved. I don't think anybody doubts young Mr. Reiner brutally murdered his two parents. There's no alibi. It's basically been admitted in the press. But how does he get prosecuted, and to what extent? That's the question. We have somebody who is a known schizophrenic, someone who has been diagnosed extensive treatment, who'd recently had medication changes, someone who struggled with substance abuse, and whose parents accepted the risk, as terrifying as that is, of having a profoundly mentally ill person reside with them as they tried to nurse him through and help him through his life and development. An almost impossible task when you're dealing with something as difficult as schizophrenia. I believe this case is going to become the latest public pawn in the national discussion of how do we deal with mental health in the criminal justice system, specifically at the juncture of the death penalty. And I hope that it results in firm rulings through the appellate pathway, restricting and preventing states from pursuing the death penalty against known mentally ill individuals.
And I think what we've learned over the course of the last kind of half arraignment and before that, when we did the show before, is that schizophrenia, the mental illness part, is actually the crutch of the case. It's very hard to determine how you want to go ahead and prosecute this. But the question is, you have a high profile case, you have a high profile attorney like Alan Jackson. The last time we did the show, he was doing press conferences. All of a sudden, a few days ago, he's no longer on the case. What happened?
I think what happened was the money ran out. And so when you deal with a situation where you don't have the funds because the family wants him to have a defense, but not with their money, I think that's what happened. But I think the reason why I think it's going to trial is because you're going to have seasoned death penalty public defenders who know how to defend these cases, and they are typically pushed all the way to trial. And the way we get to where Josh is talking about is through the appellate process, but you got to go through trial to get there.
And Franz, the rumor in LA is that the Reiner siblings, they want their brother to have his day in court, but not with their money. We know that there's a lot of trust fund money there. We know that Rick Reiner cannot get to that trust fund money because of the felonious behavior behind this case. How does a trust come into play when you allegedly kill your parents?
Well, the first question is does the trust have a don't kill your parents clause in it? And I know that sounds a certain way, but sometimes that's in there. Some states you can't inherit if you kill your loved one. So that's number one. Number two is he may just not have access to the trust for these purposes. It may be for a whole lot of other specified things. But where the rubber meets the road is I love you, but just not enough to spend my own money to defend you. And be not mistaken. Alan Jackson's an expensive pony. I mean, it ain't cheap to hire Alan Jackson. He's worth every penny of it. He's kind of like the Josh Schiffer of the West Coast. And look, it ain't a whodunit. So that's the other piece is, do I want to set my own money on fire to help my loved one out, knowing that ultimately he's not guilty? So ultimately, I don't think he's going to be able to touch that trust money for this purpose.
Even if he can touch that trust money, is it the highest and best use of it? Alan Jackson wins contested trials in a flamboyant and wonderful way. This ain't going to be a contested trial. We're going to see a stipulation as to some horrific facts, and then really the concentrations on mitigation and the death penalty, something that I'm willing to bet Alan Jackson has firm positions on, but that's not his forte. a really highly trained, death penalty certified, qualified public defender. Those people are the best lawyers in America when it comes to this kind of niche litigation, because the whole game is different the moment the death penalty is on the table. A win isn't walking out of prison. A win is you died naturally.
Well, I mean, our entire audience, everyone was waiting on us to go live after the real Nick Reiner arraignment was supposed to happen in LA. And then it was like, oh, by the way, the attorney is walking off the case. Gerald, how are they able to continue to push this down the road, this arraignment, like another date and another date, just continue to push it down the road? And is changing attorneys more about political drama than it is about actually getting this case to trial?
Well, I think what people have to realize is the arraignment is to let him know what he's charged with. If he really is suffering from the psychosis that people are talking about, he doesn't know what's happening. And so for them to get to a point where he can understand the nature of the charges, who's going to represent him, what the role of the judge is, what the role of the prosecutor and the defense attorney, we have to get him there. And so I think that what happened was, again, the money ran out. And Alan Jackson is a phenomenal lawyer. He's a high-profile lawyer. But this, as my good friend Josh said, this is about playing defense. And so you have to have the best defense possible. And here in Georgia, that would be the Capital Defender's Office, death certified lawyers who've been doing this for 20, 30 years, who understand that this is a ground game, pound it out, make sure you have the best defensive line out there. I know we're in playoff season, so best defensive line out there and keep it from scoring inside the 20. 20 would be a win. In this case, would be keeping your client alive. And so I think that what happened was they're realizing that Nick Reiner has a profound mental health diagnosis that needs to be studied by experts, and they need to get him to a point where he can understand. So that's why it's going to continue to be continued.
Okay.
Here's the other quick piece. If you could have the best representation in the state of California and access to California funding for your defense because you're indigent, why would you want your siblings' money? And why would they want to give you the siblings' money?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, Attorney Josh, Reiner is charged with first-degree murder with special circumstances, right? We talked about this before, which carries a maximum sentence of death. So the question is, at what point does a defense team, right? Because today, Josh and Gerald, you guys are defense, and Franz, you're going to play the role of prosecutor. But at what point does a defense team choose incompetency to stand trial versus insanity defense? And is the public defender going to be enough if the death penalty is on the table?
I don't know if there's a real specific juncture anytime incoming where that's going to have to be pled with specificity. We're so early in this process. The death penalty defense team is going to be working extensively with mental health evaluations, doing that background research. Because Mr. Reiner had really, I'm going to assume, good mental health support given his family, there's going to be a lot of good stuff to work with there. And it's going to take time to analyze exactly where the defense needs to point. And we remember also, we're still dealing with charging decisions being in the court or being in the hands of the state. And the state's going to come out and immediately take the most aggressive position, because guess what? That's what the state does every time. Given a little bit of presentation from the defensive, hey, y'all don't want to charge this hill. Y'all are going to get in. This is a short trip for you. They may very much come back quickly and efficiently with a reevaluation saying, yep, this isn't appropriate for the death penalty upon reconsideration. And instead, they may even cooperate with a mental health defense as long as it prevents Mr. Reiner from ever harming anybody ever again.
Well, when Alan Jackson was in fact still his attorney, we remember the press conference. He went out there and unequivocally, he said without elaboration that under California law that his client, Nick Reiner, who we know, as one of you just said, we know that he was the actual murderer of his parents, that he was, quote, not guilty of murder. What does that mean? How does that even work? If we know that he killed the parents, how is Alan Jackson able to say publicly in front of all the media on the courtroom steps that Nick Reiner is not guilty of murder? That's to you, Attorney I'm trying to understand this so that our audience can understand.
Because the Fifth and Sixth Amendments say he's not guilty. And so he's innocent until proven guilty. There's a presumption of innocence. And so what we have to understand is, yes, the allegations are horrific, but they have to be proven to 12 citizens beyond a reasonable doubt. So he was well within his rights. He was actually well within the law and the facts as we know them right now, that he's in fact not guilty.
And Franz?
I don't think he's sticking his nose out to try to argue that he didn't do it. I think that was a direct, indirect, he's not guilty by reason of insanity, guys. That's the only reason he would say that. He's absolutely, look, Gerald's right. He's absolutely presumed innocent, but I don't see Alan Jackson, by the way, who's not on the case now, I don't see Alan Jackson going that far out with his reputation and dare I say his ego, unless it's clearly not guilty by reason of insanity.
Dr. Bryant, let's bring you in on this because we're talking insanity, we're talking drug abuse, we're talking mental instability. What we know is that Nick was wearing a brown jumpsuit this last time we saw him for this 5-minute arraignment, and not that suicide vest. You saw him when he had that suicide vest when we saw him the last time. By all accounts, he looked like he was kind to speak coherently to the judge. The question for you, Dr. Bryant, is how much will the medication versus schizophrenia diagnosis really play if this goes to trial, if and when it goes to trial?
So the medication, the diagnosis is the root and the foundation of the trial. This is similar to the Carmichael trial. And we see that Carmichael, who kissed his son on the mouth and murdered him by strangling him with his bare hands in a hotel room, he's now home with his family. Carmichael is not behind prison because they were able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that his schizophrenia was in full episode during that. So he was unable to he was so impaired that he really believed that what he was doing was for the best interest of his son. This is the issue. When medicated, meaning when they are regulated and they're not in their schizophrenia episode, they do come down to baseline, which is them being coherent to say, what the F-U-C-K? I did what? Oh my God. Then they are experiencing some empathy and some consequence emotionally about what they did. This is why it's called split personality, because it is really, truly in the essence, a split personality. When they are under their episode, psychotic disorder, they really believe what they believe. And this is the thing about medication that folks don't understand when they don't have compassion for folks with mental illness. Medication does not work the first couple of days, weeks, or months. Sometimes it takes years to get the correct dosage that will balance, regulate, and get somebody back to a functioning baseline. And then once they're down to baseline, they still have to figure out, do they need more than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 medications? I have clients who are schizoaffective and schizophrenia who are on 9, sometimes 13 medications. And let me tell you, the side effects of that medication is suicide. It's also psychosis. And so if you're giving someone who already has a psychotic disorder a medication that has a main side effect of psychosis, put 2 and 2 together. We get 4, they get 400. They are not a person who is paired enough to understand what they're doing in that presence. If the attorneys, the defense can prove that, the jury is going to go for it. What I do know is that most murder cases, as much as people don't believe this, do not go the angle of insanity. They don't, because it doesn't end up being a higher percentile of them winning that case. And I'll land on this. What happens sometimes if they are not released from jail, and they usually don't get the death penalty, is what is called a mental health diversion. If the attorney can say, hey, let's divert him to mental health, help, mental health assessment, mental health treatment, and let's prove that this treatment plan is going to help him stay in baseline. It's going to help him stay in recovery. It's going to help him stay treated to where he can be an operating citizen in society. They may just be able to get that. But do I see this going to a death penalty when you have mental health as the core? Absolutely freaking not. That would be a hit to every disabled person, okay, in the world, definitely United States of America, because mental health is a disability. However you look at it, it's a disability. People are on SSI because they are disabled from helping themselves and being paired in society, that they get a check a month that says, we understand and we acknowledge your disability.
So who actually then makes that decision? Because that's a good point. We've been talking about the fact that he has had mental illness since he was actually a young adult or a teenager. Whose decision is it to say, and Dr. Bryant, I'll keep this with you for now before we go to the attorneys. Whose decision is it to say that this man was actually insane? And so that's what we're going to treat him as. He's going in under insanity. Whose decision is that? Is it you as a doctor, as a specialized person? Do they come and ask your opinion, or do they toss it to the attorneys?
I love that question. So usually when you have an attorney at his level, at Alan's level, just like Brian Steele on the Sean Combs case, there isn't one. They have a team of psychology experts, psychologists, therapists, who are trained and skilled to do assessments and evaluations only. There are certain evaluations that even myself, a licensed therapist, a licensed psychologist, cannot do. You have to have an actual license and practice in that assessment. And this is one of those cases. There will be a team of folks who sit around that are all psychology experts and say, what are your evaluations? What is your assessment? Let's compare and contrast and figure out, what are we ruling out? And what are we saying this is? And then there will be an expert that says, okay, listen, if we can get them to say, yes, he was impaired, he had no idea what he was doing, what is the plan of action we are going to submit to the jury and the judge that says this is what we and the family and the community and the experts are going to do to make sure that this does not ever happen again? If you cannot promise that, they're not going for it. And I'll land on this. I was a psychology expert on the Sean Combs case. I can now say it. I couldn't say it then. And I was in court with him, and I wrote out a long treatment, a long plan of action of what it would look like when he got released. The judge said, sounds good, but guess what? We don't see this something that would be effective for Mr. Combs. And so as many hours and time and meeting as we spent, that didn't mean that the judge seen our plan to be conducive for what Mr. Combs needs. So the judge ultimately has the last say in what goes on.
Yeah, that's a good point. And having covered that trial with you too, I think it was also a question, will the jury actually buy that, specifically in that Sean Combs case? But attorneys, now let me turn it over to you, because what we know now, what we've learned is that, yes, Nick Reiner was on medications, plural, for his mental illnesses, plural, but specifically for schizophrenia is what TMZ has reported. Apparently 1 week before he committed the murders of his mom and dad, the doctors that were treating him switched out his medicine because they said Nick was, quote, out of his head. So Franz, and I know you're in this prosecution mode for us today, can the defense attorney point the finger at the doctors and the big pharmaceuticals to clear Nick? But before you answer, let's go to a video that talks about this.
Spiral. Robin Michelle, he was doing fine on the meds. He was fine. A month or so before the murders, the doctors changed the meds, and it sent him on a spiral. Robin Michelle saw it. They saw him getting dangerous and erratic. They talked to people about it. They did not know what to do about it, but these meds were off, and he was spiraling out of control to a point where he literally broke with reality. And then you have December 13th when he slaughtered his parents. This wasn't just a stabbing, it was carnage. And we just found out why the doctors changed the meds.
Yeah, and it's
weight gain. It's weight gain, that he was complaining that he had gained weight. So the doctors accommodated him by changing the meds, which literally created a spiral into this tragedy.
So again, Attorney Franz, I'll ask the question, can the defense point the finger at the doctors for changing the meds and then at Big Pharm for supplying so many meds? And would this help to clear Nick?
A good defense attorney is going to point the finger at everybody but his client. Big Pharma, the doctors. In fact, I'd be screaming that the doctors need to be prosecuted for negligent homicide. There's a problem with that, though. If I'm the prosecutor, I'm going to find myself a Dr. Bryant, and I'm going to hire Dr. Bryant, and I'm going to be talking about inability to distinguish between right and wrong, and how people with mental health disorders can still sometimes distinguish between right and wrong. And it's very fact specific. And I'm going to look at each and everything that I can align up in this case to show that he was able to distinguish between right and wrong. And it would just be bonus if, by the way, he was also voluntarily using some illicit drugs, because then I can argue, well, wait a minute. It's his fault. It's his fault and his actions that led to the murder. And he was able, look, at the end of the day, I'm going to find myself someone as qualified, because money's not an object. I have the state of California money. I'm going to find myself someone as qualified as I can to be on my side and to testify that he was able to distinguish between right and wrong, and that just changed. And by the way, the best part for me is, if I'm prosecutor, why did he stop? Why did they change up the meds? Why did he change it up? Because he was gaining weight. We got 2 people dead because he was gaining weight. That would be my angle.
And that's the reasonable doubt part of all of this, right? And what do you say, Josh?
We don't even get in it because we haven't heard from my Dr. Bryant, and my Dr. Bryant's better than his Dr. Bryant, because my Dr. Bryant isn't just paid by the state to support the prosecution and lock people up. My Dr. Bryant works on both sides and has a more broad background, and she appears and talks across the entire spectrum and is therefore more reliable and not some paid promoter who's just out there. And by the way, she's got friends. And when Dr. Bryant brings her friends, they come big. And we're going to have multiple opinions with more letters behind the name than the state of California can put together. And that's where the conflict's going to happen, because really smart people are going to disagree as to how responsible Mr. Reiner should be held. Because schizophrenia, man, you talk about the toughest kind of mental health issues to deal with. Schizophrenia, it's like I hand you a map called schizophrenia, point you at the desert and say, you know how to get there, and run away. Sometimes some meds work. Sometimes meds will work, then not work. There could be changes in environment that change the effectiveness of the medical therapy. There can be weight gain and other issues on the side that dramatically affect the actual medicines themselves. You can get used to, or basically build a tolerance. It's a moving target like you would never believe, and you're dealing with the brain. You're not dealing with something that you just cut open and say, this is exactly what's happening. No, this is hard stuff where people react individually to changes. So the eventual decision is going to come down to the state. Is it reasonable, rational, and their mandate to pursue the death penalty with someone carrying a clear burden of substantial mental health problems? And I think they're nuts if they go after the death penalty.
Well, I'm going to jump in and just ask a question that hopefully our audience, and thank you guys for sticking with us and following us at Southern Sin. Stick with us as we go through all of these cases. And I know I want to see you in the comments. Go ahead and ask your questions or your thoughts on this case. I'm going to jump into the people that are viewing at home and ask the question, isn't it the doctor's responsibility to change meds for a client when they see that the meds aren't working? Dr. Bryant, isn't it like, if the meds aren't working, you're supposed to switch them up, right? Isn't that basic?
100%. And let me add to that, because people often think it's the doctor's assessment of whether the meds are working or not. It is not. It is the patient who comes in and says, I'm having these symptoms, that says, I don't feel regulated. And it's the doctor's responsibility to believe the impact or the affect of the medication on the patient. If my patient comes to me and says, hey, this medication is making me hallucinate, let me go a little further. Some of these medications are not just only causing weight gain. They're causing, they can't sleep. Okay, they're causing erectile dysfunction in kids as young as 19, 20 years old. They're causing a deeper, worse psychotic episode. They're causing depression. They're causing suicidal ideation. They are causing suicide. You know, when you look at all the mass shootings, all of them, there wasn't one, if you can find one, I'll wait. There wasn't one individual who was at the hands of being the shooter that wasn't on psychotic medication. That was not on psychotic medication. There's no way that you can tell me, I've been in my field 18 years, that these medications don't intensify and inflame the hallucination and everything else that they have going on. I'll land on this. I see you tagging in, Franz, that when you think of the fact that these individuals can do some of the normalcy things, right? Call the police, check in a hotel room, some of the normal.
Go to the convenience store, get a Coke.
Get a Coke, you know, say good morning to you. And then the very next day or a few hours later, they're cursing you out, they're hitting someone, they're throwing something, they're murdering someone. That is the intensity of this disorder. It is a psychotic disorder. It's a split personality. And those split personalities happen very often. Oftentimes the medication actually inflames the splits of the personality. And until you get the medication that can regulate them to baseline, you're experiencing all of the personalities. I have clients who are in session, they say, Doc, when I'm on my medication, which is now in session, I'm still hearing voices. And their biggest issue isn't that they're not regulated and calm and they're flatline, because the medication also makes you flatline to where you have no emotions, which strips you of your empathy, by the way. And empathy is important for shame, and that's important for decision making. But they also are saying that while I'm medicated on these 9 to 10 medications at almost the highest dosage, there's still voices in my head. So I still have an impairment while I'm medicated. And these people are embarrassed about their diagnosis. They're not telling friends and family that I'm medicated, but I'm still hearing voices. They're not saying to friends, listen, I'm medicated, but I don't feel normal. I'm out of whack. I'm having suicidal ideation. These people just want to be normal human beings. And they are going to put on a mask. They're going to put on clothing that makes them feel as normal as possible, but they are not. And they're not going to share that information with everybody, which means they don't get the help that they need.
But I think in this case, when you have a dad and a mom who have so much money and have been coddling him and holding him accountable and working with him this entire time, Attorney Franz, is vanity a reason for them to take this man off of his meds because he gained a few pounds?
Doc has given you a pathway to reasonable doubt, except she's also given you a problem. All the things that she talked about, the only thing that we factually know is in play right now, assuming it doesn't change, is I've gained some weight. And she said, her words, her testimony on direct or cross is not working. The medicine's not working. And I don't know that 12 people are going to say, wait a minute, you gained some LBs and that's the reason we're going to change it up. We're not talking about erectile dysfunction. We're not talking about suicidal ideations. We're talking about weight gain. And I'm sorry, guys, but vanity, changing up medicines, psychotic medicines for vanity, weight gain. And look, my inner fat boy understands. I get it. I'm just saying that I don't see 12 citizens biting on that apple. I just don't.
Franz has lost a lot of weight in the last couple of years, and I'm very proud of him for doing that. He has become far healthier.
But was it on the meds or was it on GOPs? Two different things.
But we gotta know this: Porky means not guilty.
Undefeated.
I want to counter real quick to what Franz said. He said that he's sorry, but his weight gain could not make him feel a certain way, and he just can't understand that. You are absolutely right, Franz. You can't understand. You know why? Because you don't have a mental health diagnosis. You are not schizophrenia. You are not medicated. You have been experiencing this for the past 15, 20 years. You haven't had to experience an identity crisis because you don't know who you are from minute to minute, from day to day. You have family and friends who you don't fit in with, who do not accept you. You are medicated with a group of possible friends who are not medicated, with a group of possible friends who can get up every day and operate in a normalcy with society, so they don't have to deal with sometimes the identity crisis that comes from people who don't understand it, like yourself, who doesn't understand mental health. Let me go a step further. Weight gain could affect you and I, who are normal citizens, in a way that just says, I need to just cut back on food. I need to work out 5 days a week. Someone who's medicated, who has a disorder, that weight gain can be the triggering factor to depression, suicidal ideations, and unfortunately, like this young man, murder of somebody at his hands of his diagnosis and a psychosis and a psychotic disorder that oftentimes doesn't get respected, acknowledged, or treated correctly because it's either overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed, or the medication that they have is more for financial benefit and not for the treatment of the individual with their well-being and their mental health being at a status that lets them be stabilized.
Well, and to follow up on what Dr. Bryant is saying.
Light up that cigar. You're going to need it. Light it up, brother.
That's my coping mechanism. My coping mechanism.
He took a few puffs every time he agreed with you. That's what it was.
and Franz is not normal. Other than that, I agree wholeheartedly. But no,
guys,
Doc's making a great point, because when you get into this universe, the role reversal is almost impossible. And you never know what member of your jury has that family member. And that's what the state needs to be thinking about. Because guess what? I know Gerald because we practiced in the same community for 20 years, and he's seen the mentally ill people that our fine city kicks out on the street with no support or organization. When you're dealing with someone in the full throes of a schizophrenic, psychotropic break, it's not like talking to a human being. They're looking through you. They are in a different universe. If you get a juror on that jury and the state starts leaning into responsibility and choice making, they go, hold on, my cousin Eddie didn't make one choice when he was freaking out. It wasn't him. That disease is the devil.
It is.
And that's where the state loses any integrity when it comes to the death penalty or being hard on crime or whatever horse corpse they're gonna thump.
Well, and to that point of Nick maybe not feeling himself at times because he was on this medication. By the way, let's remember, and if I were a juror, I would take into account he's been on medication for decades. He's battled these issues for decades, and he's come from a family that has been able to help him. Unlike maybe some of those people on the streets of LA or New York that don't get the help that a Nick Reiner was able to have. Attorney Gerald, this is for you, and we've talked about it before. There's plenty of surveillance video that shows Nick before and after the crime. He was at the Conan O'Brien party as just a regular person, even though some people felt, oh, did we really want him here? Because we know he could be a bit unstable. He looks relatively calm, Attorney Gerald. Does that lend to a person who is aware and cognizant of his actions?
I think that goes back to what I know the public defender's office is going to do. It's going to get several Dr. Cheyenne Bryant's, a team, put it together and do a timeline analysis of all of his actions leading up to and after the murder and make sure that it fits the psychosis that he was suffering at the time. One thing I know about capital defenders offices and public defenders offices who mainly focus on these type of defenses, they build a whole team effect to make sure that they pre-trial mitigate to the state. Here's what you're going to deal with. And then they also get jury consultants who will give a profile of the ideal California juror who will not vote for the death penalty under any circumstance. So I think that what we're going to see is they're going to use that surveillance footage. They're going to use their doctors. They're going to use their mitigation team to convince the prosecution in California that this is not winnable as a death penalty case. This is an issue that either he is not competent to stand trial or he's not guilty by reason of mental defect. I don't think it's a death case. And I think that the PD's office will paint that picture very strongly.
And I know a lot of our viewers also have had these questions, but he, like I said, he just looks so calm. How is he able to go about his day, go to the bodega, then check into a hotel? He was at a party the night before. Dr. Bryant, and I know you've seen it because you just touched on it, but families that deal with these mental illnesses, specifically with schizophrenia, they're in a fight at all times, right, to protect their loved ones. And we've heard some dribble come out about how his parents had been trying to help and keep him close and keep him protected while he went through his trials. Many patients will just get off of the meds and try to figure out what that imbalance is. At what point, Dr. Bryant, do you hold the actual patient responsible? Because you've told us about what the meds do and how they make them like this. But when is Nick Reiner, just the person, going to be held responsible? At what point?
At no point. At no point. He can't, listen, he can only be treated and facilitated. He cannot be held responsible when he is under an episode, when he is under psychosis. That's just, it's impossible. It's like you holding a person in a wheelchair who is riding by you and accidentally rolls over your foot. Now we know that, Nick, Ryan, we're not excusing the behavior. We're talking about the disorder, okay? Runs over your foot on accident, head to the restroom, and you say, you know what? Assault. The fuck? Excuse me? Huh? Like, we got to be realistic here. And we have a very big disability community. We do. They just don't get a lot of acknowledgement and love because, again, they are not the normalcy. They are not accepted in society, which is sad, which is the problem. This is why I said if they were to give this man the death penalty, an uproar across the entire disabled community is going to go crazy. It's going to go ham. Second of all, it is absolutely the state's responsibility to have programs and facilities and treatment put in place to help the folks that can't help themselves. We all pay taxes on here. Okay, everyone who who is making money legally is paying some taxes that go to something called the state. There's nonprofits that have certain programs without legislation, without certain folks in office who are writing up legislation that says there needs to be programs for these people. Guess what? It not only helps them, it helps us. It helps the parents. I spend 90% of my time psychoeducating the parents on how to facilitate their child with schizophrenia than I do trying to help the child be regulated. The parents are in more distress than the individual with the disorder because the parents are the ones that are at risk. These kids are flipping from day to day. These kids cannot stay in any recovery home, even if it's a dual diagnosis home, because they end up breaking the rules. They end up being someone who they can't facilitate at the home. They're causing chaos with every other individual within these recovery homes. And they're not really people who need recovery. They need long-term treatment in a facility where medication can be administered. And I'll land on this. About 90-something% of them are administering their own medication. And almost
but wait. Okay. In this case, we know that he was not, right? So I guess the question is, could Nick have known and appreciated the consequences of his actions, double murder of his parents, if he was wrongly medicated and drugging? Like he literally had the calm and the wherewithal to just move about his day, right? So could he have appreciated and known that what he was doing in this moment, because he was medicated?
Could he have appreciated and known what he was doing?
I Nick had known and appreciated the consequences of his actions, which is the murder, because he was wrongly medicated.
Got it. So there are going to be consequences for him emotionally and mentally and psychologically. When they get his butt down to baseline, that's when the empathy comes back in. When you are medicated or you are in your psychosis, there is no empathy. That is called sociopathical. That is psychotic. So if I am sociopathical, which means I'm lacking empathy, I don't have any emotional attachment, involvement, or feeling towards my actions or my behaviors until I'm back to baseline. Once this man gets back to baseline, he will absolutely feel all of the emotions and the psychological impact of his actions and behaviors. But will that be good enough? Will that moment of shame be good enough for him not to go back into a psychosis, not to go back into an episode, and absolutely feel the exact same rage or anger that he felt at the hands or as a result of being mentally diagnosed with one of the most excruciating, challenging disorders a human being can possibly have?
And at the end of the day, the real question is this, and we've danced around it. At the moment of these murders, was Nick Reiner competent or incompetent? They're going to spend a lot of time arguing over, well, medicine here, recent setbacks or positive. At that moment, when he is murdering his parents, is he competent or not? If he's not competent, you can't hold him responsible. You can lock him up in a hospital forever to protect the community, but you cannot be convicted of a crime if you are incompetent when it is being committed.
Okay, so that's this one. We have more to get to, by the way. Everybody stick with us here at Southern Sin. I want to get each one of your predictions on this case. The basic question is, we're still at the beginning. I'm going to start with you, Josh. What are your predictions for the arraignment? What are your predictions for the arraignment?
Oh, it goes off without a hitch, gets punted, and eventually he gets committed to a long-term facility, potentially criminal, potentially medical-based, as they recognize the depth of his illness.
Attorney Franz?
I'm going to agree with Josh. He has to maintain competence to plead not guilty. It's going to take a while to get him there. And then every time they bring him back to the county, he's going to escalate or go up and down a little bit. I think ultimately this guy's going to probably land in a long-term facility.
Attorney Gerald, what are your predictions for this arraignment?
I think the arraignment is going to be continued. I think there's going to be a trial over his competency. And as the other attorneys have stated, he will spend a long period of time in a facility to deal with his mental health diagnosis.
Dr. Bryant?
I agree with you, Attorney Gerald. I think that's definitely going to trial. Definitely no death penalty, a mental health diversion. And to Josh's point, they're going to try to figure out how do they keep him in a treatment facility long-term enough so that it protects us, the folks out here, from him.
So what I'm understanding is this is just going to go on for at least a year. At least. This is just going to continue to go on and on and on.
Absolutely.
Yeah. 5 years, 10 years. He's not going anywhere because, like Doc just said, he's a threat to the community. And one of the utter failures of our nation is we don't treat mental health appropriately. We need to have a multiple pathway approach, including not just let's protect all the women and children out there, but the way you do that's by taking care of the people who are ill. Because right now, most states will put a check in your pocket, which goes to a payee who robs it, stick a handful of pills in your hand, and stick you on the street. And that does not work. They will not take their meds continuously, which is necessary. They will not have a support system that allows them stability. You can't have success without stability in mental health. No way. You got to sleep in the same spot every night. You got to have people that have schedules. That's how you have a baseline of success. Without that, you may as well just doom them all to prison, which is exactly what people want to do with the mentally ill in America these days.
Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, thank you so much, as always, for all of your insight and giving us the real on this case. I know you'll be back with us because we have so much more. And as we just discussed, this case is going to be non-ending. Dr. Cheyenne Bryant, make sure you tune in to all of her socials, but also follow us on at Southern Sin. We'll see you next time, Dr. Bryant.
Thank y'all for having me, family. Love y'all.
Love you back.
Attorney Gerald, Attorney Franz, and of course, Attorney Josh. Let's move on to the next case. A lot of fun here. This one, I guess, though, I think a little bit more emotional, although I shouldn't say that because mental illness is emotional as well. But it's also a heartbreaker. Let's take a look at this video.
May 24th, 2022. Police respond to a school shooting at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas. Video released of the response garnered outrage when police took 77 minutes to kill the gunman.
Mr. Ramos, can you hear me? Please put your gun down, sir. Please don't hurt anyone else.
The shooter entered Robb Elementary at 11:33 a.m. 3 minutes later, 11 law enforcement officers arrived inside. Officers at several points delayed gaining access to the room by clearing other classrooms and negotiating with the shooter. After 50 minutes, a team begins to move towards the classroom. A little over 20 minutes later, rapid gunfire, and the gunman is killed.
I just don't know what was going through those policemen's minds that tragic day, but everything said, there was just no action.
19 students and 2 teachers were killed by the gunman, and 17 survivors were hurt.
Somebody's error was made there, and they gotta pay for that error because we're paying it for the rest of our lives, not seeing our kids grow up.
Nearly 400 officers waited before confronting the 18-year-old gunman, and only 2 officers have been charged. One of the 2 senior officers in charge is now going to trial for the failures of that tragic day. Former school officer Adrian Gonzalez faces 29 counts of abandoning and endangering a child. If convicted of all charges, he could face up to 58 years in prison. Gonzalez pleaded not guilty to the charges, and a judge granted his request for a change of venue for the trial. Defense attorney Nico LaHood said, quote, "It would be impossible to gather a jury that would not view the evidence through their own pain and grief."
I think in this case, it was just negligence. Who waits 77 minutes outside? Who does that? Because I guarantee if it was their children, they would have ran in. And that's just all there is to it. They failed us. They failed our kids. They failed our city. They failed our community.
Soon after we received the news that our daughter was among the 19 students and 2 teachers that died as a result of gun violence. We don't want you to think of Lexi as just a number. She was intelligent, compassionate, and athletic. We stand for Lexi, and as her voice, we demand action.
In response to the shooting, the Texas Senate passed the Uvalde Strong School Safety Act, improving the way police deal with active shooters.
Well, on May 24th, 2022, a gunman killed 19 children and 2 teachers at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas, while 400 trained and armed police officers waited for over 77 minutes. As you just heard in that video, it just makes no sense. Now, former officer Adrian Gonzalez is facing his criminal charges for the role in which he failed to respond. I have so many questions for the panel. Again, we're joined by attorney Franz, attorney Gerald, and attorney Josh. This one is more of a heartstrings pull, but it's reality. The kids died because of the negligence of adults that were on site. If a civilian had waited 77 minutes, that's over an hour, while children were being massacred and murdered, would they already be in prison? Why does a police badge give you the freedom to be treated differently? And I'll start with you, Josh.
This one's tough to unpack because what it really represents is a continuation of this new theory of law enforcement and the justice system of punishing people for failing to act under these new circumstances. We saw it in Michigan with the young man whose parents had provided a firearm, and then he went and committed a mass killing at the school. We're seeing that here with this officer's failure to fulfill his obligations and duties now creates a criminal liability. And at my heart, I disagree with that. I don't believe the failure to act in this situation gives rise to an actual criminal charge as much as I find their failure to act to be indefensible. I think it is civilly extraordinarily liable. I believe that there should be massive suits against everybody involved in this utter failure to take the appropriate actions to prevent additional deaths. But it's not the criminal system. I believe that the local DA in Texas is doing standard political prosecutor theater by charging an officer. I don't believe they're going to try the case efficiently, effectively, professionally, or perfectly at all. And we've already seen some of that. I won't be surprised when the case suddenly falls apart, as much as I believe the officer does deserve some sort of accountability, but it's not criminal. We do not lock people up for not running into a suicidal mission. Sorry.
Okay, Attorney Gerald, I want to hear your answer to that. If a civilian had waited, me or you, had waited 77 minutes while children were being massacred inside, would we have gone straight to jail?
You know, that's a difficult question because I kind of understand where Josh is coming from, but then I also think about those children whose duty it was that officer to protect. And so, you know, I think that a regular civilian, if their child was being horrifically killed and they failed to act, I think they probably would be charged some sort of criminal negligence, some sort of omission to act. But for law enforcement, I definitely think that this should have been charged. I think more should be charged. And I think ultimately a jury should make a decision on what should be the standard in that community to expect from law enforcement. Listen, they're paid to run towards danger and away. So it's definitely a violation of his oath of office to not go in and address this horrific execution that is occurring. You could hear the children screaming for over an hour for help, and he failed to act. So I definitely think that a civilian would have been charged. Now, getting to a conviction, I'm not sure, but I think that this officer should be charged. I think others should be charged to uphold the standard we expect from law enforcement when they swear an oath to protect and serve.
Attorney Franz, I mean, maybe from a prosecution standpoint, I'd like for you to answer that question. Why was a police badge treated differently than a regular civilian?
So I'm going to preface this by saying the defense attorney in me hates this case. The prosecutor version of me would say he swore an oath. He took the money, he got the badge, he took an oath. You, me, civilians have no duty, no obligation, no oath to run in. And candidly, we're not talking about being a sacrificial lamb. We're talking about him using the training that he got at the expense of the government, at the expense of whoever hired him, doing the bare minimum job he was trained and paid to do, that he swore to do. That's why he's being prosecuted. That's the new normal of our country right now. Whether we like it or not, that is what the people want. Now, the defense attorney in me hates this case, Dara.
Tell us why.
All right. So I hate this case because we are now demonizing not the shooter, the person who's really responsible. We're requiring law enforcement officers who are not getting paid enough to be sacrificial lambs. Because look, yes, he took an oath. Yes, he swore a duty to run into there. But unless I'm making 6 figures, if not 7 figures, I'm not taking bullets in an unsafe environment where there's no certainty that me running in there would have saved any lives. You can say it's 70 minutes. You can say it's 170 minutes. There is no certainty that it would have changed anything. And I agree with Josh. Sue the shit out of him and the law enforcement agency. It's a civil case. Prosecute the shooter. That's the criminal case. This new reality is, why would you ever want to be a cop if this is the reality of what, if you don't run into the danger and take a couple of bullets, you're going to get prosecuted and possibly face 50 plus years? That makes no sense to me.
Yeah, and we've been posting a picture of the alleged shooter there on our screen who went in and killed 19 children. This Adrian Gonzalez is getting 1 count for each of those 19 and the 10 children who survived the targeted area. As a parent, as an adult, aren't you kind of responsible for children? Like the mother who ran into the school, she didn't stop to think about what's going to happen to me. She ran into the school to get her kids. And we know that the result of her actions was that she was arrested. But yet and still, the person that wears the badge stood outside and just waited.
You're talking to 3 dads right here, and every one of us would break every law in the entire universe to protect our child. End of story. That's why they don't let the victim's family on the jury or prosecute, because I'll kill a person. Like, just not even gonna even dance around it. You gonna hurt my child? Man, welcome to me. It's gonna be a short party. But that's not what we're dealing with. This is a guy who is a cop who swore to do a job. Did he fail? Oh, yeah. Is there civil liability? I hope so. That's how you change politics. Take away their budgets. Take away their ridiculous immunities where we can't get accountability. Now, the response to that shouldn't be, well, let's put him in prison, because Franz is right. We're never going to have a police officer. And most police officers are really trying to do the right thing and be good public servants. This guy getting strung up in public for 50-something years because he didn't commit potential suicide, running into a terrifying situation that eventually required 400 officers to respond. All right, that's just theater. And I'm angry at these children's deaths, but prosecuting this cop, that is not the remedy. Let's break the system's ideas about how this stuff gets paid for and how we hold our systems accountable.
Well, the defense is actually arguing that he lacked information. So I've heard all 3 of you say about training, that the police officers are trained. The defense is saying he actually lacked information. But wouldn't the reasonable doubt here, or even just the general basic question, say body cam footage, radio traffic, screaming victims, cars coming to a halt, police cars, everyone coming to the scene? Doesn't that make it crystal clear that this was an active shooting investigation? And that's why he was called to the scene.
I mean, absolutely. And I mean, he's in a social media reality world now. I knew what was happening in Robb Elementary School in real time. So I don't know if that's the best, argument on his defense. I think, what we have laid out here is the best argument that, he really didn't need to go in and sacrifice his life. And maybe it's a civil issue and not a criminal issue. You can't prove that he intentionally did anything or that he negligently did anything. Again, got to get to that burden of beyond a reasonable doubt. But I think saying he lacked information, I think that's walking him down a road to a conviction.
Attorney Franz, what do you think?
So they tried this case in Florida. I've been trying to Google the name of the law enforcement officer that got tried in Florida, and I'm hoping that somebody remembers it, where basically he was prosecuted for not going into the fray, and he was acquitted. They prosecuted him for multiple counts of a whole bunch of different stuff, and he was acquitted. And he was acquitted because his defense was, there was no certainty of where the actual shooter was, and thus there were mixed issues with knowing where the danger and harm was. So I'm not saying it's going to work here.
For over an hour.
It does not change fundamentally. It doesn't change fundamentally the point of at what point is he being compensated to be a sacrificial lamb. I'm not saying it's pretty. I'm not saying you shouldn't sue him. I'm saying, like Josh, I'm saying, man, oh man, prosecuting this guy and putting him in jail for 50 plus years doesn't feel like justice. It feels like something else.
Josh, if this wasn't criminal negligence, what's it called? What would this be?
Well, it's definitely civil negligence, a violation of oath. There's 8 million different causes of actions if we really sat down and put our heads to it. But it's the criminal allegation, and folks need to realize the gulf between civil and criminal is universal, and it's deep, and it's wide. They are different universes. You can't go to prison for owing money in civil court. You can owe, it can ruin your life. You ain't getting down the road. Criminal, you go down the road, there's nothing else like it. It's the cruelty of the criminal justice system being applied in an arbitrary manner due to the fact that this officer is being accused of not fulfilling a duty that to him might have been unknown at the time. How the state's going to argue that he should have thrown all caution, thrown his own inherent sense of self-preservation to the side, run into a dangerous situation that he does not have all the details about, where there's lots of death and destruction happening, how that becomes a crime, that's a big problem for me. Because in America, you can't be forced to do very much with a criminal penalty. You can be prevented and restrained, but forced to take an affirmative step, that doesn't happen.
Well, this week or recently, the judge denied a defense motion for a mistrial after a teacher provided testimony that we hadn't heard yet, that hadn't been shared with the defense. The judge denied the mistrial, but struck her from the record. What does that signal about the judge in this case? And does that mean, and this is just me watching too many shows like Reasonable Doubt, does this mean that the judge isn't really feeling the defense? That's an extra question that wasn't in there, but I'm interested in this.
No, it means the prosecutor violated the discovery rule and didn't turn something over. The judge is calling balls and strikes. Now, sometimes you can read a judge by some of the rulings, but this is a missing of a discovery rule, and so he's punishing the prosecution for violating the law and not being transparent in turning everything over.
Which lots of people will say, hey, it's not fair when the state breaks the rules. But all three of us will tell you, the state breaks the rules intentionally, constantly, without any concern, and there's almost never accountability. People like to get on their high horse and talk about how their civil rights get violated every day on purpose. They are hiding evidence, withholding, being malicious with their disclosures, and lack of ethical accountability. We've seen it in prominent cases. Remember, in YSL, Judge Whitaker had to send a whole team to talk about your basic discovery obligations under the joke of a case that we call Brady, which is ostensibly the standard that all prosecutors need to meet. And I'd be willing to bet you go poll 1,000 criminal defense attorneys, 999 will tell you that Brady is a failed experiment that harms the best interests of justice in America because of the way it's abused without any accountability by courts.
Josh, I feel like you got some feelings there. There's some stories you might want to tell us off record, because I feel like
Gerald knows I get pretty, man, I had every opportunity in the world, so it makes me extra pissed off when people that don't have the opportunity get screwed by a system that's set up to hose them. And it pisses me off even more when people hide behind their well-intentioned, it's just my job, because guess what? Your job doesn't care about your ethics and your soul and your decency as a human being, because jobs come and go. And it's gross when I see the rules get violated knowingly and openly because they know that nothing's going to happen.
Jobs come and go. So, and clearly this Adrian Gonzalez, this officer down in Uvalde, now has no career. And the emotion that we're all sharing and feeling, and Josh, that you're displaying right now is only a portion of what the emotions are down in Texas for these kids. Anyone with children are weighing in on social media. And by the way, thank you to our @SouthernSyn audience. Make sure you stay with us and continue to drop your comments down below and follow us across channels. anyone says, like you guys says, you would go and risk your lives for your child, and really any adult to go and help a child. Is this prosecution about justice, meaning the 19 children that were killed and the 10 children who survived? Or is this about protecting the system of these officers, right? Protecting the system by sacrificing one, maybe two officers? I'll throw that out to you, Gerald. Let's start with you.
I mean, you made a good argument for the latter. But I think that it is about accountability for what happened to the children. I think because the shooter is gone, they had to hold somebody accountable. And so these two officers are the sacrificial lambs. That's what it feels like. But ultimately, at the end of the day, the system is going to protect the system. And I think the system failed those children.
And DA needs to get elected, which is part of Gerald's argument. DA can't stand up there and go, no, I'm not going to do anything. Want to know why? Because then somebody runs against him and says, hey, I would have done something. And in low turnout, low interest elections, which unfortunately is the vast majority of prosecutorial and judicial elections, one issue like that can change the winds for everyone. So local DA, man, he saw the road. He had enough pissed off parents whose kids were dead because of bad police response, and he needed to do something. So he charged a couple cops, throws them up on the barbecue, gonna have no problem sacrificing these two officers to an angry mob of parents who have been brutally hurt, regardless of whether it's legal or proper or decent. Legal, proper, and decent have left the room.
These trained professionals cowards, and it sounds like people can also look up to government and DA and say that maybe they're also being cowards. The lawsuits and the settlements have happened between the families and the school districts, and also the gun manufacturers, because that's something that we tend to forget about at the end of the day. The people that are able to just go out and get unlicensed guns and go and commit these mass murders. What defense could police officer Adrian Gonzalez possibly use to get a not guilty verdict? Gerald, let's start with you.
I think we've laid it out. I think the Scott Peterson case, which was just put in the chat, is the similar case there. I mean, I didn't have enough information to know where the danger was coming from, and I couldn't respond appropriately without risking my life. I think also the inability to show criminal intent, because again, you have to have an act or omission plus the intent. So I think there are avenues here for defense, a successful defense for this law enforcement officer. And I think what you need to know about juries is they are very cautious to convict an officer in conservative jurisdictions like Texas.
Not even conservative. I've done some 1983, and I know Gerald and Franz have done the same. One of the hardest things to talk to a jury about is, hey, officer friendly, person you were raised to treat well, that's out there to protect you, they're the bad guy. That jump emotionally and intellectually is difficult, even with the most egregious facts.
Even when little kids were massacred. I'm trying hard to understand. I don't understand.
Franz?
Franz, I can jump in. I can jump in. So even when little kids are massacred, it does not, the emotion of that statement doesn't mean that we change the fundamental rules of the system and start impugning criminal liability where we traditionally never have. And that's the crux of this case. Is we are talking about the law enforcement officer that didn't run in. We're not talking about the main person that caused the shooting. And I got to tell you, if I'm a juror and I found out that the shooter's already dead, I'm kind of like, it sounds like justice has been served. And I don't mean that callously. I love life. But it's like, you want me to now convict a law enforcement officer and put him in jail? Is that because we can't put the shooter in jail because he's now dead? That's what it feels like to me. And look, there are jurors that, to be sure, will vote guilty. But I don't know that you can get, Scott Peterson showed us, it's a tough finish line to cross, especially when you can sue the shit out of everybody and get some justice that way too.
All right, everybody, we're broadcasting this trial live all week, so please tune in at Southern Sin at 9 a.m. daily. That's every day. We're going to run the feeds. You're going to see what's happening there. Stay with us as we have all of these stories going on. We've got one more, though. It's not the end. And our amazing panel of our cigar puffing attorney Franz is there. He's going to stay with us. Josh and his great smile, and attorney Gerald and all of his insight are going to stay with us for this last case. It's a pop culture nightmare twice. Here's the video. Let's take a look.
Rapper YNW Melly, whose real name is Jamel Demons, back in a Broward County courtroom Monday as the state prosecutors and the defense are going over a number of different motions filed to see what will be admissible for Demons' retrial. Demons is accused of murdering Christopher Thomas and Anthony Williams, both childhood friends, back in 2018 after a late-night recording session, and then allegedly made it look like a drive-by shooting. His first double murder trial ended in 2023 in a mistrial after jurors failed to reach a unanimous verdict at trial, with twists and turns that included allegations of witness tampering, passing messages in jail, and alleged plans to escape. All issues brought before the judge today to see what would be permitted to use in his new trial. Demons faces a number of charges that include 2 counts of premeditated first-degree murder and witness tampering. And he is expected back in court January 12th on Monday at 8:45, where the judge will hear additional motions. That trial has been set for January 21st.
All right, so we're back inside the YNW Melly double murder retrial. That's why we said twice. 2 friends are dead. It's one story that doesn't add up. The state calls it an execution. The defense says it's a drive-by. Now the truth gets a second test in this retrial that has already started off with accusations of witness tampering. Again, our acclaimed panel is here. All 3 attorneys. We've got 2 in the role of defense attorney today. And Franz, you're going to play the role of prosecutor today, but please continue to give us your defense attorney thoughts anyway. I'm your host, Dara Kennedy. Here's the first question. Melly's first trial was in July 2023. It ended in a mistrial after the jury was deadlocked with a 9-3 vote in favor of convicting him on lesser manslaughter charges. If this case was so airtight, why did the first trial collapse, and why are they now having the same witnesses suddenly remember things that I didn't remember 2 years ago? I'll start with you, Josh.
There's a lot to unpack because of the multiple perspectives, depending on how you unpack it. You've got a retrial. All of us have retried a case that's come back for one reason or another. It's a totally different game because you already know 80-90% of what's coming out. You can be prepared. You've got to be ready to impeach and challenge the changes, as well as explore deeply anything new and highlight that for a new panel of jurors who ostensibly know very little to nothing about this case. Now, YW Melly's got some solid counsel there. Drew is a heck of an attorney, and they have poured over this with as many consultants and jury plans and mock trial. Man, if anything, they've over-prepared for this. But the state still carries that burden. They lost the first time because they couldn't get 12 people to agree on the same theory in unanimity, even though they did have that plurality or majority of jurors looking to convict on a lesser charge. And that brings up the lesser charge concept. We've all seen state prosecutors bring the thunder with the top charges when we know there ain't no way they can carry the top charge. They're doing that as almost a throwaway for a jury, begging that jury is going to pick up one of the lesser charges. It's called charge stacking, and it's bullying by the state. Instead of charging what they think they can win, they charge everything, waiting to see what's going to stick in the end, hoping the jury's going to split the baby. Because at the end of the day, 2 moms lost kids. There are 2 dudes from the neighborhood that are dead. That's a pretty heavy-duty issue. Jurors want to get pissed off and hold people responsible, but state's got to proceed properly. And now that you've sprinkled in all of the witness tampering, both sides are going to lean into that. Witness tampering, appropriately presented, can either bolster your position or absolutely gut your arguments.
Yeah, allegedly Melly shot his 2 friends from inside the car, right? Thomas and Williams, and then worked with another homeboy to make it look like it was a drive-by. Gerald, why are people just remembering things now during this, after the mistrial for this part particularly?
Well, I think that after you've gone through a trial, the state has an opportunity to try to go back and clean stuff up. So now memories become a lot clearer after threats of perjury from the previous trial. So I think that it gets interesting. I think it's easier for the defense because now we have a full transcript of what you said before. And now if you're on the stand and now magically you remember things, well, sir, you were under oath and you told a different hearing panel a different set of facts that are now different from what you're saying today. So what has changed? I think that's what Drew Finley is going to use. He's an exceptional defense attorney, and I think that he's going to be successful. And the fact that at the previous trial, the state couldn't get 12 citizens to agree on murder, 9-3, already showing that this is a case where they may need to reassess their theory, and throwing in some witness tampering could get 9-3 to 12-0 of not guilty. So I think it's going to be an interesting trial to watch. Anytime you got witnesses that are changing their stories midstream, I chomp at the bit for that.
Attorney Franz, if it was so airtight, why did the first trial collapse?
Well, we try cases because we let citizens make decisions. And all of us are like weathermen or women. We predict what we predict, but ultimately what they do in the back in the jury room is what they do. And it is what it is. We may think something is a slam dunk and it's not. We may think there have been cases that I won that I was like, really? I won that? Huh. So we try them because that's the way our system works. And look, 12 minds. And what's interesting to me is we let 12 citizens, not one, not two, but we let 12 citizens make the decision together. And you absolutely have to retry this case. From the prosecution perspective, you got 2 dead bodies. You're playing, by the way, as a prosecutor, I'm always playing with house money. I'm not going to jail. If I lose, I look at the family and I look at the people and say, you know what? The chips didn't fall where I wanted them to fall. The citizens made a decision. I disagree with it, but I respect the system. And I move on to the next one. I lose nothing retrying this case. It may not be fair. It may not be what defense attorneys like. And as a defense attorney, I hate it, right? But you kind of have to do it. Justice means sometimes doing things that are tough, including trying uncertain, shaky cases sometimes.
And I want to bring back on something that Franz and Gerald both hit on, where it is the advantage to the defense in any retrial. When Gerald was talking about getting a chance to go back and look at these witnesses, as we know the state's leaning on them, trying to squeeze them and say, hey, I'm going to get you on a perjury. I'm going to come get you over here if you don't cooperate over here. There's all that out there. But I've watched both Gerald and Franz eat the lunch of people holding a transcript in their hands, talking about what they used to say versus what they want to say now. And nobody walks away from that. A good lawyer is going to crush any witness that substantively changes their position in between trials.
Can you help our Southern Sin audience and me as a layman person and maybe quickly take us through the process? And I'll leave this to any of you. Is it typical for law enforcement or the prosecution to have contact off the record with witnesses between trials, like the one?
Absolutely. And so
they went to coffee.
I had a case, and many people know it's on this platform. Go look at it. The Atlanta Public Schools cheating scandal trial, the last 3 or 4 days, where the prosecution met with a witness at Chick-fil-A and walked them through their testimony. And so to have a transcript now that you can walk somebody through what they previously said and say what happened between now and then is so beautiful. That's the first question when you get up, you walk into the podium.
Look at him smile. Look at him smile.
Hold that transcript up and like, now, is there anything you want to correct before we get to this? You start seeing them sweating, they're getting water, they're shaking. And I usually stand in front of the prosecution and say, don't look at them, look at me and look at this transcript. Is there anything you want to correct in front of this jury before we get started? And it's like magic. So yeah, I think to walk the audience through what's going to happen is every single word you said, I'm going to get you to repeat that word and then repeat the word that you said a few minutes ago and get you to say, was that one a lie or is this one a lie? And at the end of it, you're going to be so confused and realize that you've been screwed by the state that you're going to admit that you lied under oath.
And the best part is, it doesn't matter what the cat comes out and says. Gerald's got him. Like, You can't step off the line because the jury can smell bullshit better than any. I laugh about juries. They're the dumbest 12 people that couldn't figure out how to get out of court. We're going to let them decide what all these lawyers and judges who have millions of dollars worth of education couldn't figure out themselves. We got the 12 people that know nothing. But trust me, those 12 people have the sharpest nose out there. And when Gerald starts talking about, and then this, you can't lie that fast. You can't trick them and come. No, everybody sees right through that and sees the sweat dripping down the crack of your rear and goes, shit, Gerald's got me. So you can't lie. Lying, man, even better. So it's that kind of advantage. But at the same time, the state's going to turn around and have locked down the stuff that they knew registered with the takeaways of the jury most. That piece of evidence that maybe wasn't stressed, oh, it's going to be stressed this time. That little teeny bit where someone attached to it in the post-verdict or post-mistrial interviews, oh, they're going to come back with that. They're going to lock it down. They're going to have a new investigator that's going to show up. And they also know when Officer Steve has maybe stumbled into something, oh, they're going to get ahead of that. Oh, they're going to come up with some kind of rehabilitation, some sort of fix, because they know the Geralds of the universe are prepped and just are holding the knife.
Yeah, because what we've learned is that Melly is actually accused of pressuring one of his key witnesses from the 2023 trial to not testify this time around. So if one witness was influenced or coached or went to coffee, as you guys say, does that legally contaminate every piece of testimony in the courtroom that we've heard so far? Oh,
no, not really.
Oh, this is good. No. Tell me.
No, not really. Because I mean, ultimately, it comes down to a determination by the jury of what they're going to believe. And so the prosecution can make allegations of witness tampering. And if they haven't charged Melly with that, I'm going to get up there and say, you don't got to believe them. They don't even believe themselves because they didn't charge him with it. But what you should believe is what this person said under oath in the first trial. And now between then and now, oh, magically now, oh, my client tampered with somebody. No, the state tampered with them. And I'm going to walk that witness through when they changed their story to the state after the state said, we're going to charge you with perjury.
And you don't even have to do what means. You literally, hey, man, let's talk about what happened. So when you were here last time, we did da-da-da-da-da, right? Yeah, man, and here it is. And that was all you said. Yeah. Now, it's a year, 2 years later. You just testified to something different. So I'm just trying to ask you, how'd you change your mind? Why'd you change your mind? And let's talk about those circumstances. The moment a juror hears, well, and then, yeah, we had that meeting with the DA's office to review the truck. Oh, hold on. You ever done a car deal? What happens when the sales guy goes and talks to the conning tower? Do you think he's coming out there to help you or to help the sale? Like, it's stuff that the jury sees that there's been any manipulation, any changes. It inserts that nugget of inequity and the
questioning.
But
it's a different jury this time around, correct?
Well, and hold on. We don't trust the government no more. 25 years ago, when I started practicing law, if an FBI agent or a federal agent said, man, most people are going to be like, yeah, man, that's the truth. These guys. No. The one great benefit of the political challenges we're dealing with is the cynicism on government actions, because we ain't bullshitting no one. All that stuff they taught us about that they did to the civil rights leaders, yeah, it was all super real. All that stuff that they did to their enemy, yeah, we know about it. It's naked. And we use that in the defense when someone's getting bullied. And when the state's trying a case for the second time, you can talk about bullying all day.
I tell you what, as a New Yorker, I don't really drive, but if I even get a ticket, I'm calling one of you. All right, so there's one last thing. There's one last question before we get out of here. Thank you guys for being on with us and watching us here on Southern Sin. Stay with us daily at 9 a.m. as we go over all of these interesting cases. Right now, as you see on the screen, we've got a shot of Melly. He's got his fur and his chains, and he's doing all the things like a fashion model. He comes to court like that, too. Unlike the Sean Diddy trial where he was given just 5 outfits to wear for the 3-month trial, Melly comes in like he's making a statement. I want to hear from each one of you as defense attorneys across the board. What advice are you giving your client if it's Melly? Josh,
I've
you
had high
fashionable.
profile
Let's start with you.
individuals, and most of the time I try to keep the camera off them at all times because the kind of work that I do isn't really stuff that we like to discuss. But you kind of got to lean into who you are. And if that dress and appearance reflects him and his confidence, then he needs to lean in on it. I vehemently dislike the treatment of people, even like Sean Combs, who are prohibited from dressing and appearing somewhat normally, because the impact of seeing someone in chains and a uniform is ridiculous. You can't get away from it. It is so prejudicial. At the same time, pissing off a jury ain't the best thing. I was involved with some gentlemen of some Italian descent a number of years ago. They all showed up to court wearing suits that were out of a bad 1980s shiny mafia. And it was like,
it's just called Jersey, Josh. It's just New Jersey.
Yeah. You can't dress like that. You dressed guilty. And there are jurors. But from the defense perspective, remember, I don't want 12. I want 2, 4, 6 people to be like, don't misjudge that person based on their appearance.
Attorney Franz, what's your advice if your client is Melly and he's coming in every day like he's walking down Fifth Avenue?
So if you can be authentic, you need to be authentic, but you've got to be in a position to condition the jurors for what was the number one thing that your mama taught you when you were a child, not to judge people on the way that they look, to judge them on the facts. And in this case, there's reasonable doubt. And look, he's going to be accused of being a performer no matter what he wears. He can wear what he's wearing. He can wear a suit and a tie. Someone is going to argue from the state at some point, he's just putting on a performance. So at least if he's authentic, he cannot be called inauthentic and putting on that performance. I don't like it. But then again, I'm not, this is Atlanta, right? Or is this Georgia? I mean, where is this? Where's this trial?
I think it's in Florida.
Yeah, Florida.
It's in Florida. Florida. Different people, different communities have different ways of looking at things. And look, he is a high-profile defendant. You can put him in a tuxedo and people know who he is. So at this point, are they judging him based on what he's wearing into court? I don't know that they are.
Last word to you, Gerald. If this is your client and you're in Atlanta where people are hot and flashy and doing fashion all the times, even as they are walking into the courthouse, what's your advice to Melly if he's your client?
He still has to understand he's making an impression every time he walks into that courtroom to 12 citizens that control his fate. So I do want him to be authentic to who he is, but we don't need all those chains. He needs to dress like he's going to an awards show to win a Grammy, with a nice tuxedo, nice suit, and he's in church or something solemn, because that's what this is. And so I understand the younger generation, they're flashy. They want to show off the wealth. This is about your freedom. And so I think that Drew Finley will do a great job of presenting his client in the most respectable way possible. But we have to understand he's an artist, so he's want to be artistic, but he got to understand he's on trial for 2 bodies. And so you need to take that into consideration.
Gerald, would it be fair to say that YW needs to just read the room and dress appropriately?
That's exactly what I'm saying. He needs to
read the room. Really quick question before we get you guys out of here. Will he be found guilty or not guilty on this second trial? Josh, really quickly, guilty or not guilty?
I hard to say, but I think they're going to pin him on something.
Something. Franz.
Hang him high. I don't think that they're going to pin him on anything, and I think they're not going to come up with a verdict.
Gerald?
It's Drew Finley. So, I never doubt him. It's going to be a great show. I think ultimately they can't prove the top counts. They may get him on a lesser offense, but if Drew's on the case, he's one of the best. I think he can pull it out. So you may see a not guilty all the way down.
Everyone watching at home, this is our phenomenal panel that we have discussed these amazing trials with, or had amazing discussions about these trials. The Nick Reiner double murder trial, the Uvalde kids 19 dead shooting trial of Officer Adrian Gonzalez, and of course the YNW Melly trial, who is now up on its second one for the witness tampering trial. We're going to keep covering all of this later this month. Well, for tonight, that's our show. So guys, thank you for staying in, tapping in, and for all of your defense attorney / comma parentheses prosecution advice as well. You know, and at home, we didn't tell you what to think. We showed you what to question, because it's about reasonable doubt. Justice doesn't just live in verdicts. It lives in the details behind the scenes. So thank you for staying with us. Continue to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for @SouthernSyn right here on YouTube, and drop your comments in the chat, because we see them and we will also call you out. We stream live trials every morning and drop all new true crime episodes every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Daily at 9 a.m. and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. I'm Dara Kennedy, your host for everyone. Have a good night.
True crime just got darker. Catch the full episode on the link above. Subscribe to @SouthernSyn today and hit the notification bell for more live original episodes Wednesdays at 8 p.m.